Thank you very much, Tineke and Aikaterini, for sharing your findings of your research and getting us a bit closer to what we can and should expect from these new forms of social entrepreneurship. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, time is ticking, especially for unsustainable companies, so we will move immediately on to the discussion. The floor is yours. I would like to invite the panelists to come back to the table so that we can start the discussion. In your schedule, you will find that it says that the panel debate would include Mr. John Montgomery. Unfortunately, he was unable to fly in from the US, but he sends us his best wishes. Now the floor, it's up to you. I see many, many, many questions. I saw there first and then 2 and 3. Please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Very good discussion or presentation to show us that when we move outside, let's say, the standard company form, let's say company with profit-making purpose and shareholders, so the environment is fragmented totally. So now we are talking about hybrid. So in every jurisdiction there are different kind of let's say solutions. So in some jurisdictions there are things called cooperatives, and there's a lot of cooperative research all around the world. And I believe that most of those cooperatives, I know, they pull the social purpose, and it's very would be interesting to hear what are the unsocial cooperatives in Greece. If there are social, and then there must be unsocial cooperatives also. Then there are civil law foundations. In many jurisdictions, social purpose is run by businessmen in civil law foundations. So it's for me, when I worked in it, so I was really confused, because there are corporate courts in Finland, so cooperatives and civil law foundations who do the social enterprise work, and now Tineke is proposing that we should have again another European social company form. And what is that? Should we, let's say, liquidate our present social enterprises and transform them to these European social enterprises? So my point is, this is very, because I'm totally confused.
Oui. Who can we give the floor?
Okay.
Or Aikaterini?
Because we addressed Greek cooperatives. Actually, the history of cooperatives in Greece started really like in the 70s. It's a very developed concept in Greece. So they are not only social cooperatives, because this was, let's say, introduced, the social cooperative enterprise was introduced in 2012 as the vehicle for social enterprises in Greece. I think the legislators tried to use cooperative in the sense that it was a very successful, as you said, social vehicle. But of course, there are cooperatives that doesn't have to do with social enterprises. You know, yeah. Now I can't I can mention someone, but something, but yeah, I can't. I don't have something in mind specifically. But I definitely know that there are cooperatives with another orientation than the, you know, like the one in the social cooperative enterprise. No increase.
Could I say something on that?
Yeah, okay, continue.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, unless were you just about to say something?
No, I think you want to explain that it's a new model.
I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, no, the social cooperative enterprise is a very new model. Like it was introduced in 2011, and in a very bad situation of the financial crisis. So back then the government thought that probably it's a good vehicle to provide, you know, like to the state for I don't know, new, you know, like a new type of enterprise. So yeah, this is. I don't understand. I don't know if I answered to your question, but
yeah, that was my point. So because in my mind I know. So we have had cooperatives little over 100 years.
Yeah.
And they are basically Your description of social cooperative, it fulfills our general description of cooperative. So that was the reason I was confused. So let's say a legal entity with members who participate, let's say fulfilling the purpose of the entity, the profits belong not to the members but the entity itself, etc. For instance, employee, so cooperatives with members are employed, they self-employ themselves and so on. So that was my reason. Of course, there are different kinds of cooperatives in my country because it's very, very popular. But that was the reason how I make the distinction between, let's say, social and unsocial cooperative.
Yeah, but like this model is really new, and I think it's an enterprise more than a cooperative. And I think that, you know, what the state tried to do with this law is to promote a social enterprise in a cooperative legal form, you know, because this was very famous in Greece and it works a lot. So I think it's totally different from the regular cooperatives that exist in Greece. And yeah, this is my point.
Okay, you wanted to add something to that?
Just a thought when you brought up the characteristics of the Greek social enterprise. Sorry, when you looked at the Greek social enterprise and the one member, one vote, we had a similar system to that in the UK, which was the mutual building societies, and they fell into disrepute as far as the left was concerned and as far as the right was concerned. The left, because it meant that when you had a lot of members, no one group could exercise any control over management, and management just did what they want, and they were variously considered to be corrupt. And the other side obviously didn't like socially sort of orientated organizations and wanted to turn them into companies, and that's what they did. And then we had a financial crisis on the back of those demutualized societies. But the problem is that you do have a governance issue. I think once they become quite large because everyone's particular power is very much diluted.
So one more remark on the panel on this point, and then we'll move on to the formal.
Yes, it was just a remark to Yuka. We actually made there has been made a study in Denmark about which corporate form these social enterprises uses, and actually they uses all types of corporate forms, and it didn't even seem to be an overrepresentation of cooperatives. So I was a bit puzzled of that, but thinking about it, I think most cooperatives in Denmark, they are just commercial and used, for instance, in the agricultural sectors, so that you get your profit depends on how much you deliver to the company, being it cattle or whatever you deliver. So I think there's no social purpose there.
Okay, and we had a first sir here, yeah, and then Gail, and then Beate, and then Bella.
Thank you very much. I'll give you an anecdote and a comment and a challenge. Unlike you, I think you all carry one hat, which is the legal hat. I'm more of a practitioner, and I carry a number of hats. I'm an independent consultant with the United Nations on sustainable governance issues, and I also work for a Norwegian consultancy as well as a British-based think tank. I had a major responsibility last year on the Rio +20 conference on governance issues, and one of the initiatives we made was to try to get a corporate social responsibility background paper that would hopefully result in a possible convention blueprint going. Well, from a 15-page document, we ended up with one paragraph in the outcome document, which is not bad. It's called paragraph 47. This is about corporate social responsibility with the UN today, and there are actually a small number of countries talking about this. It's headed by Denmark and South Africa, and they call themselves Friends of Paragraph 47. It's a very original name. They're doing something on the global level with the CSR issues. They're actually other than A, so they talk about CSRA because they about accountability as an important issue. Now, while we're negotiating this, we have the support of major multinational companies. And one of the CEOs that spearheaded this with us was the CEO and the directorship of Aviva Group, which is a large international insurance network. We managed to have a group of countries that were opposed to this idea in a closed room in in Rio, and we were discussing this, and this one delegate turned around to us rather angrily and said, "You don't want this." And the guy from Avivo said, "Yes, actually," because he said, "You don't have the support of private sector." And the CEO from Avivo said, "Sir, yes, and we do want this." And he turned around and he said, "No, you don't." And that was a representative from the State Department, the Foreign Office. And I asked him, "Why don't you want this?" He said, "How can we monitor this when we come home? It's impossible for us. That's why we will oppose it." That was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Talking about the Ministry of Finance here, I think they need to be counted in as well as a player here. Now the challenge is, presently, one of the big surprises coming out of Rio is the Sustainable Development Goals. They're presently being identified by the UN, and on December 13, there will be an International Governance Day on this is going to evolve in the future, and on February the 7th, there will be an international day relating to Sustainable Development Goals, the rule of law, and future governance. Now, as it's been agreed upon now, every country in the world will adopt the SDGs once they're finalized in 2015. How will this impact the Sustainable Development Governance is beyond me, but are you also going to incorporate this? I think this is an incredibly interesting group of people, and the research you've made is fantastic, and I think we failed to include you when we tried to get the convention. We won't make that mistake again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on the panel? Yeah.
Well, just to sort of connect your point and your point, I totally understand your confusion on why there is a hybrid of a hybrid in that sense. And I think that's why it's very important that when we craft hybrids that we're very careful. And a good kind of live example of that is in my province of British Columbia. 7 years ago, we created a community service cooperative. And again, I also see the cooperative form as a very flexible form, but it's cumbersome in a lot of ways, which is why a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily want to adopt it. And the community service cooperative in BC, in terms of success, there have been 12 community service cooperatives that have been incorporated to date. And so there is the potential with any kind of hybrid for it to be dead legislation. And just dormant and lying there. And so I think that when we move forward, we have to be very careful about that and how we can be able to enable these hybrids to gain traction in corporate practice. And so I'd be really curious to find out what the numbers are in this Greek, community enterprise cooperative and its success to date, because right now internationally in the hybrid game, there are winners and there's losers. And it's just kind of an interesting phenomenon to be studying. But, so I totally understand where you're coming from. And in terms of the governance question, that is one that we have to keep in mind.
Okay. I want to move on to Gail, was the next person on the list for the questions. Please keep, all the question askers, keep it short. Okay. We still have 5 more minutes.
So I just wanted to ask a broad question of the panel as a whole, and that's about the role of social enterprises in changing the norm of shareholder primacy, which we've been talking about throughout the day. And I can see maybe on the one hand, the existence of social enterprises might question this axiom that shareholder primacy is good for the community as a whole. But on the other hand, my concern is we have social enterprises that are supposed to produce a social benefit. What does that say about the rest of the corporations? Can they ignore social benefits and just maximize shareholder value? So that would be my broad question to the panel as a whole.
Who on the panel would like to react?
I thought that was my whole presentation. Go ahead. I mean, I think that's I think that's hybrids have to be real hybrids, and that's why I have a real issue in a lot of ways with the U.S. Benefit Corporation, because I find that in Canada there's a big push for it to be implemented in Canada, and I'm really resistant to that idea because I find it really redundant with our corporate laws. And so to me, that does completely confuse what the mainstream corporation is supposed to do. And we go back to, the economic part of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations and how, we try to make a profit, we create a general benefit, blah, blah, blah. And their provisions just aren't stringent enough. They don't do anything new. And so it's sort of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We need like the right fit. And and that's why I really enjoyed Karsten's paper, because, you know, we have one that might be too stringent, we might have one that's too flexible, too light, and it's just about finding that. And there is that risk there that I think is always prevalent, and is something we just have to be conscious of too. So,
Tineke.
Yeah, and I think it serves two purposes. These new developments in social entrepreneurship, maybe three. Yeah, the first is that it can really help job creation. People can create their own green job. That's, I think, one of the headings in our newspaper was one of the headings in our newspapers last week. That young, talented people coming from universities wanting to go into green directions have a hard time finding a good job, so they're creating their own job. That's one. Second, elaborating on where Mr. Wiekman ended, like we also should have attention for what is happening on the micro level, not only what is happening on the macro level. So maybe we can find good examples at the micro level, either in regulatory approaches or in maybe business model approaches. And third is maybe we can learn from that how to change the mainstream corporate form. Thank you.
Okay. And you also want to
I think in my presentation, I think I touched upon, to begin with, this issue whether this social enterprise were in fact a competitor, or maybe would be an excuse for politicians to say, well, then we don't need to do anything about general company law or mainstream company law because we have really done what's needed. But of course that could be overcome if we could describe that there are two different sections or sectors. One is those who have really maybe even a majority of pursuing a social benefit, and then them who are just responsible, but who are not going in that extreme. So maybe we should have more stringent requirement for social enterprise to allow that the general or mainstream companies have a broader scope for improving their social responsibility.
Okay, we've boiled down to the last question. That was a question by Beate before the coffee break.
Thank you, so I'll keep it really short. I just want to say, very interesting, and touching on your last point, that it's very important that we learn from those cooperatives that may be sustainable, from social entrepreneurs, from the hybrids, but that we don't let that be an excuse to leave mainstream company law alone. Because it doesn't help if the fringe is good, if mainstream is unsustainable. And to the gentleman in the audience, let's talk on break.
Okay. With that, I want to close this session because the coffee awaits you. I've seen many more hands with many more questions, so I hope this people can find each other during the coffee break as well. I want to thank all of you for raising these interesting questions, and I want to thank the panelists for sharing their expertise and their knowledge and their research with us, and for the very interesting contributions you gave. So thank you very much.